Hi, I'm John Waldman from Fluid Mechanics, and we're going to go over today FM energy systems. And we're going to specifically start with what's called Discover FM Energy System. So it's the first book in the series, and there's a total of 5 books. And so the first thing that we want to do is have you start off with getting in the water, and we want you to do a short practice just so that you can get a feeling for some of your current habits and practices during a workout. So the first thing that we want to do is we're going to do a warm-up. So you jump in the water, you're going to do a warm-up, you're going to do 4 times 75, swim on the first 75, then pull on the second one, kick on the third one, and swim again on the last one. They're all freestyle and there's no stopping, so you just want to swim through that as you normally would in practice. And then you want to write down what your heart rate was at the end. So take your heart rate for 6 seconds and then put it down so you know how many thumps, right? That's your heartbeat going, and you're going to put it down on the paper so you know what your normal heart rate is during a warm-up set. Then again, this is a very brief short workout, but we just want to get a kind of a baseline from where you're starting from. The next step is you're going to swim a distance swim 1-400, right? And again, freestyle, and it's all non-stop. And then at the end, take a heart rate. Okay, from there, so that's a second set. Third set is going to be 4 50s, 15 seconds rest. Okay, and then again, freestyle. So we're going to be doing what's called an interval set. So 4 50s with 15 seconds rest in between each, freestyle. Then move to 4 25s. Again, 60 seconds rest in this case. So 4 25s with 60 seconds rest in between each. That's going to be a lot of rest, and you want to do your stroke, whatever that specialty stroke is. If you're freestyle, do freestyle. If you're a backstroker, do backstroke, right? Whatever you want to focus on there. And then after that, you want to do 4 25 sprint with 20 seconds rest in between each bout, okay? And then that's going to be choice. So you choose what you want to swim. If you're a breaststroker, you can still swim backstroke, whatever you'd like to. So again, 4 times 25. And the last one is going to be 150, and you're just going to do it no butterfly, just relax and nice and easy. That's a cool down. So one more time, we're going to do 4 75s for a warm-up, 1 400, and that's going to be a distance swim. Then we're going to do an interval swim of 4 50s with 15 seconds rest. All of those above are freestyle. Then we're going to go 4 25s with 60 seconds rest, your stroke. That's what's called repetition. And then you're going to go to sprint, 4 times 25, 20 seconds rest, and that's going to be choice. And then you're going to do 150 down easy with no butterfly. Okay, then from there, we want to find out, and I want to ask you a few questions. So once you accomplish that, what I would do is I kind of pause the video right now and then go swim that, then come back and watch this. And then you're going to learn a lot more because you'll have a baseline to start with. Okay, and I'm going to just give you a few questions to ask yourself and see if you can answer those questions. And if you can answer those questions, that'll mean that you're more able, if this makes sense, to understand energy system. You're just kind of finding where your information and knowledge level is. So the first one is, what should the maximum heart rate be during warm-up? Okay, what's the maximum heart rate during warm-up? And if you can answer that question, that's great. And then how long is the rest interval in an interval set? And what should it be? Within how many yards should you achieve your target heart rate during a training set? What's the purpose of cool down? What energy system is predominantly used during distance-based activities? And your last question, if you have these, is what are the 6 training phases of the season? Now, if you know all of those, then you're doing really well. You got a great starting point. If you missed a lot of them, then you know you've got a lot of opportunity to get better. And that's what we're looking for, to see how we can help you understand your training so that you can go into your practice with your coach. And the coach puts a team practice up and you can dig more out of it. You don't want to just do the practice, right? It's not just doing what everybody else is doing. We want to get the quality out of each thing so we really know what we're doing inside of practice, right? And that way you can get more and more out of it. Because if you, and it's really important to understand that if you do what everybody else does, you're going to get what everybody else gets. If you do something different, and to get something different, you want to think differently, act differently, And then what will happen is eventually you will get something back, a different return. And that's what you're looking for, so that you could get better than your competition. Now, why you would need this program again is to understand thoroughly how to dig more out of there. With fluid mechanics, you're going to get our expert trainers, and they are absolutely fantastic at what they do. You're going to get event-specific training. So let's say you want to do 200 breaststroke. That's going to be very different training than somebody who's doing a 500 free or a 50 free. These are different forms of training. You need to understand more how to squeeze that same workout, squeeze what you need out of that same workout. Okay, and then you're also going to get personally trained or tailored workouts. So you got personally tailored workouts. That means you go into your practice and you can tailor that workout. Now, if you're working out on your own, you can design your own practice. But if you, and again, this will help you tremendously to do that. But if you're swimming with a team, then you're going to need to be able to take whatever's there and mold it and bend it to what you need it to be. And if you don't know how to do that, then that's where we get in trouble, because we can't squeeze out what we need out of that. Okay, so, and let me just also say that endless laps are not the solution. Going back and forth in the pool and just going back and forth in the pool, it does not do what you need it to do if you want to be a high performance swimmer and you really want to be good at what you do. So to get really great at what you do, that's why you're going to need this type of information. So the first thing you want to do is know yourself. And what we mean by that is that you want to know your genetics. So there's a couple ways to test and get an idea without being real invasive. I mean, you can go over and you can get a biopsy, or instead you can do a jump test. And in the jump test, basically what you do is you would reach up and you can see whether you are more explosive or less explosive. You can reach up on a chart. The chart will have a measurement, and see how far you can reach to start with. And then wherever you reach to, then you leap up, jump up as high as you can and touch again. And the difference between those two, between where you first reached and where you last reached, will tell you how high you were able to explode and jump. And that will give you an indication of how explosive your muscle tissue is, at least in your legs. And that'll give you an idea of whether you're more likely to be a sprinter. So the more explosive you are, the more likely to be towards a sprint type of activity. Doesn't mean you have to swim that, but it is going to be more likely. Whereas if you are less explosive, then more likely to be a distance style swimmer. And then you can kind of be all in different areas on that. So you want to kind of check and see where you are on that. And then you also want to, and that helps you to determine the type of muscle, where it's red muscle tissue or more white muscle tissue. More white muscle tissue means you're more explosive. More red muscle tissue, a little bit less explosive. And that's your genetic predisposition. Now, let's say, and I had a friend of mine who trained because he was on a team, and that team always trains distance swimmers. That's kind of their thing. Everybody there, they're going to go a lot of long distance. So he trained his whole life to be, if this makes sense, a distance swimmer. However, it's in America. In America, there's very little chance genetically, if you look at our genetic pool, because we're a melting pot, right? And there's very little chance that all the genetics in one area is going to be the same. Maybe somewhere on an island that has been totally cut off from the rest of the world, maybe you get a similar genetic pool, but not in America. And so we have very different genetic pools. So all the kids on that team were trained to be endurance style athletes. He had a very tough time, because then he went down and he swam, and he was a good distance athlete for Clemson University. And then on the last swim of his career in college, they said, hey, why don't you just jump in and swim 100 free just for fun? And he did, and it was devastating to him, because he found out that he was an amazing sprinter. His whole life he was a great sprinter, and he was genetically set up that way. And then all of a sudden, they didn't recognize it, because he had always trained for distance. So he had actually, when you train for distance, your sprint recedes, and your ability to sprint. When you train for sprint, your endurance recedes somewhat. So in that case, he had always trained himself against his genetic predisposition, and he was very good. But he would have been an amazing sprinter. And he realized that at that moment. It was very difficult for him to deal with, realizing that his whole time and his whole career he was training for something that he really wasn't as genetically predisposed to. Okay, so you want to kind of get a feeling before you go into, all this training and spend all this time. You kind of want to know what you're designed for to start with. One of the things that we want to talk about is our holistic approach for in-water training. And so we want to look at the athlete, we want to understand more about them, we want to deal with the psychological and emotional aspects, because there's a lot of emotional aspects to training. And if you don't deal with that side, you're only dealing with the body as a machine, and right, in that case, you've got a little bit of a confusion, because the emotional aspect is very important to get the emotional energy charged to be able to do the type of training you need to get major gains and make major progress. So the first thing that you want to ask yourself is, what knowledge level will I need to have? If I'm going to be a fitness swimmer, then a low knowledge level might be fine, right? If you're going to be kind of somebody that's going to be competitive, in that case, you're going to have a moderate knowledge level, and that'll work. But if you want to be a high performance swimmer and really make major moves and use swimming as a vehicle to get somewhere, versus just kind of be on a team and be someone who is happy with practice and things like this and having fun with the other kid, that's fine. But that's more of like a hobbyist. But a high performance swimmer is using swimming as a vehicle. In that case, and they're trying to get to, win the next big meet, or they're trying to get to college and swim, or travel, become famous, things like that. If you're trying to use it for that, you need a high level of knowledge. Then you want to ask yourself, what's your specialty stroke, which is pretty simple, right? And what distances do you prefer to swim? So just because you're genetically predisposed to being maybe a sprint athlete, doesn't mean you can't train yourself to be a distance or a middle distance athlete. And sometimes that desire to do that is going to bring a lot of energy, again, emotional energy to the game, and that may help a lot. Sometimes it's good to match it up to find out. Just good to be knowledgeable about it. Okay, so then you want to find out, what are your baseline capabilities? And what that means, in comparison to other swimmers that I want to beat, I feel my endurance level is lower, higher, right, or equivalent to the athletes I want to beat. And same thing with speed. So, is my speed lower, higher, or equivalent to those who I want to beat? And also my explosivity. So these are three, right? We have endurance, we have speed, and explosivity. And we want to know, where do I sit compared to the people that I want to beat? And this is just an estimate, so you're just trying to get a feeling for that. So then you're going to get general race characteristics. So from a scale of 1 to 5, do I prefer to be, am I preferring to be more of a, or do I feel like, right, and 1 being the weakest, 5 being the strongest, do I feel like I'm more of a distance style swimmer? Am I predisposed to that, middle distance or sprint? And what part of the race am I strongest in? Am I strongest in the beginning of the race? Am I strongest in the middle, in the end, right? And what part of the race are you absolutely weakest in? And you realize, you know what, I'm really not I'm not able to bring the race home. Now that may have to do with pacing, or it may have to do with your endurance and your capability to endure, or how fast you can get out, right? And that can go back to training, and it can go back to predisposition. So we want to make sure we know ourselves a little bit more than just kind of getting a feeling and going. Now let's talk about the difference between global versus local energy systems. So global energy systems, I'll use an example that may help the most. So let's say you have somebody that is an endurance athlete. They are trained to be a marathoner. And they're a great marathoner, and they're doing fantastic in there. And you take that marathoner and you put them in a distance race, because they're a distance athlete. Put them in a distance race, but in swimming, right? Now what's going to happen in that race a lot of times, if they haven't trained to swim, they're going to be using a different group of muscles. So their global system, their heart, their lungs, things like that, that's all been trained very well. The problem's going to be when you look at their local systems. Their local systems would be, for instance, when you're looking at the marathon, the local systems that would be used would be, for instance, the legs, right? That's probably where they had most of their emphasis when they're running. However, in swimming, a long distance freestyle race, for instance, it would be in your arms. So they're going to get exhausted right away, even though they've got great global potential for delivery, right, throughout their cardiovascular system. The arms aren't built to be able to handle it because they weren't trained to handle it. So at the local level, it can't accept the energy that could be delivered from the global. Right? And sometimes you have the locals that are trained better, but the globals aren't developed enough. So the difference between global and local. And so what we'll be doing generally in your swim training is generally being trained mostly global, but you'll also see it, depending on which race. So that's why you want to kind of specify which race and which event that you're trying to train for, so you can get your locals trained properly for that event. Now we're going to move on to the 3 energy systems, and the main idea is to produce ATP, which is called adenosine triphosphate. And what you're trying to do, that's going to be causing your energy, right? Or it's going to be allowing for it's broken down so it gives you the energy you need to make the motions you need. So there's 3 systems. One is called the explosive system, which we mentioned just a little bit ago, and with that, it's called adenosine triphosphate phosphocreatine, or ATP-PC. Or some people say it ATP-PCR, and that's the anaerobic system, which means it does not have oxygen. Anaerobic. Aerobic is with oxygen, anaerobic is without oxygen. This system is used for quick bursts of highly intense, powerful motions, such as starts, turns, and short sprints. Then you have your lactic acid system, and that's also anaerobic in nature, right, without oxygen, and that's called anaerobic glycolysis. Glycolysis is the breakdown of sugar. So this system is used for short, intense bouts of exercise, such as sprints. And then you have what's called the oxygen system. Now the oxygen system is aerobic in nature, which means it uses oxygen. This system is used for extended bouts of exercise, such as a middle or long distance event. So basically, when you look at the explosive system, it lasts normally between 0 and 16 seconds. Okay, and it has the ATP PCR system working together. And then when you go for a sprint, you'd be using the lactic acid system. So that lasts normally between 1 and 2 minutes. That's not as clear cut, and you'll find that out as we go along, as what I'm saying, but it's going to give you a real clear view to break it out first, and then we'll integrate it. So again, from 1 to 2 minutes, the lactic acid system is normally producing most of the energy. And then in the oxygen system, right, that's called, in the aerobic glycolysis, that's going to be anything more than 2 minutes. So if you're running a marathon, you're definitely using that aerobic glycolysis, right, or called the oxygen system for us. Okay, so again, really quick review of that. So when we're looking at the explosive system, lasts up to 16 seconds approximately. The lactic acid system from 1 to 2 minutes, and the oxygen system is anything over 2 minutes. That's more of an endurance type of activity. The next step here is we're going to use what's called the training pyramid, and we're going to introduce you to the training pyramid. And all through the course, this is such an important aspect. The training pyramid is really a really clear visual view of how you train from a season to season, and it breaks down the year, the cycles, the phases, the workouts, the sets, right, all the way down to the elements. And the elements of the set, which might be heart rate and number of yards, things like this. So all the details. So it goes up to it's a hierarchy, and it breaks it down to its finest components. And that's called the training pyramid. You want to be really, really familiar with the training pyramid. It's going to do a huge amount for you. It's basically like a "You Are Here" sign in the mall. It shows you exactly where you are at any point when you're designing, and it gives you an overview of everything. So it's like a map. Next thing we're going to look at is what's called the training triad. And in the training triad, the really simple aspect of this, and you're going to constantly use a training triad, and the really simple aspect is you want to get the right heart rate. And so we talk about the key to training right. So you're going to get the right heart rate for the right amount of time with the right amount of rest in the right season. One more time, you're going to get the right heart rate or intensity for the right amount of time, how long that heart is beating at that rate, with the right amount of rest during the right season. That's why you need to know what season you're in when you're doing your workout. Which season am I in? So you can pick that and say, okay, now I need to get the right heart rate for the right amount of time with the right amount of rest in this type of training. Finally, we want you to define your target so we know what you're going after. Okay, so number one is you're going to take out a form, and it's showing on the screen now. And the first thing you want to know is, what is your target event? Then, what date will your target competition start? What's your goal? What's your ultimate goal? How much progress do you want to make? We normally suggest between 2.5% and 5%. And you can go online at fluidmechanics.net, and you can go on our online training program. You can go into what's called the FM time zone. And inside there, it helps you set your goals. It's fantastic. Again, 2.5% to 5% per year of training is considered good progress. So it's really important to know what you're trying to do. You can also get time splits in there, which will tell you exactly how fast to swim on every lap. Okay, next question, have you run your time splits? And that's where you get that again. Go to fluidmechanics.net, go to our online training. After that, you want to create a race map. And the race map, again, is where you break all this down into, it's fun, so you can see how fast it should take you to get off the starting block. And how fast should it take you to get from the starting block to your breakout? How fast should it take you to get from the breakout, and how fast should you cycle down the pool, right, for every cycle? So let's say it's 1.3 seconds is how fast you want to cycle. Well, as soon as you know how fast you want to cycle, guess what? You just found out how fast you got to do your push-ups and your sit-ups and things like this. So you want to train your muscle to contract at that rate. And then when you're doing a flip turn, right, you want to say, okay, how fast is that? Or if you're doing a breast turn or a back turn, right, how fast do I need to get from this point back to this point? And then it's going to also give you a breakout time. So you want to do that race map so you really know exactly what you're trying to achieve. So you're training to get that accomplished. Right? So then once you have that, you can use what's called a tempo trainer. Once you have your cycle rate, and you can use that tempo trainer, and you put the tempo trainer in, it acts like a metronome in your you just put it in your cap, and it acts as a metronome, and it goes beep, beep, beep. So if you're swimming freestyle, it's beep, beep. That's your cycles, right? How fast? If it's 1.3 seconds, it'll cycle you at 1.3 seconds. You just got to keep up with it, okay? And so that's the idea. So that race map is so important. After that, you're going to and it's going to help you say, how many cycles will you take per lap? And that's going to be the real thing, right? It's cycle count plus cycle rate is going to give you an idea of how fast you're going to swim. It's very important. And then once you have that, how fast will you need to cycle to achieve your race goal? Right, so that'll tell you exactly how fast, so how many, and then how fast. Have you created a seasonal plan for your in-water training? You'll need that too. One thing you probably would be able to know is what date you'll start your in-water training program, because you'll need to know that. And then what date you're going to want to start your in-water training taper. So that's, again, these tools will help you tremendously to understand that. And that's what we'll be helping you with, all this information as we go along. What date will you start your strength training program? And when will you begin your strength taper? Because these are very important, because they have to dovetail together with your in-water training program. And as I mentioned, Fluid Mechanics has tools online that we can help you with to help you really get that down, so you know exactly when you need to do the transitions, when you need to do your tapers, when they need to end, so you have a really clear plan on how to get this done.